But before I get on to that, I just want to talk a little bit about the trader that we're going to see and that we have reviewed a lot of his trades. Just talk about his process now. He's got more than 8 years experience and he still records his ladders every day. And that's what we're seeing. We're seeing the recordings of his ladders, which he then goes into and looks to see after every big move and every big trade, how he can improve his execution on that trade. And it's this constant reevaluation that really pushes the performance up. And really just need to stress how there's always something to learn by looking back at these trades, particularly the ones that don't work. I think that's where you get the most value out of, it's a consistent theme, you learn from your failures, but really this trader emphasizes how much he uses that to his advantage in order to build his performance and really be able to execute with a clear mind in the moment, knowing that he's fully prepared as much as possible. And what we've actually got today is got some excerpts from his own debrief on this trade, just to give you an example of what he looks at and how he assesses and reviews his trades. So what's important to see here is that we've been in quite a consistent downward channel in the Bunds. This is a Bund 60-minute chart, and we can see the big red candle which occurs here for the Draghi speech, and we're then going to follow on and look at the denial that occurred the following day afterwards. Now, starting with the commentary from Draghi, on Monday he was set to give a speech at the European Parliament at 2 p.m. and traditionally this speech normally echoes the last ECB press conference. However, in this occasion there was a slight change to the wording on inflation. And we can see here, this is the headline that really got the markets moving, or was really picked up and interpreted in quite hawkish fashion, albeit it's actually quite similar to the wording that was used in his price statement. So it wasn't something that gave a screaming sell in the Bunds, but considering the bearish trend and just considering the price action and the way that it developed and the way the aggression really built and the momentum built, it did create a really large move, and if anything quite far beyond what the floor as a whole were expecting from this comment, to the extent that you will be able to see, you can get caught trying to fade this move slightly early because it is so overextended. So as soon as the speech was released on the ECB website, the trader quickly looked through the text, and without seeing any particular significant changes, he then focused on the flows that come into the Bund BTPs, the Bund and the Euro. And that's where we're going to catch up now by just jumping into the ladder. Okay, so I just want you to focus on, you have your Bunds and your Euro. And really I think as a starting point they're the two main markets to look at. You could also consider the Bobl as well, the German 5-year, to see how this trade develops and how it starts to gather some momentum. Okay. So you can see he's executed 80 lots in Bunds short, just on a little bit of a tick up and a little bit of size coming into the Euro, and just holding an offer in the Bunds. But just want you to notice how slow this trade develops, and it wasn't something that was necessarily easy to hold. But as he gets the confirmation, you'll see how he gets quite aggressive and starts attacking into the lows. Well, the low of the current rotation in the Bunds. And you'll also pay attention to execute a long position in the Euro as well. And what you'll see, the pickup comes when the headline is dropped that that I previously just highlighted, which was, where is it? Yeah. I think it was something along the lines of Draghi sees a vigorous pickup in inflation. The word vigorous was certainly held on to. So that headline's been dropped. He's then adding in now to 180 Bunds and long 30 lots in the euro as well. But you can see now this really starts to accelerate. He's noticed the flows coming in, and he's also executed 140 lots short in the Bobl. Now really the main focus now that he's got his size in, as always, it's to try and stay in the trade as long as possible until he sees the exhaustion. Now this point actually comes quite a bit further along than he was expecting, which you'll see because he actually starts to try to get in a little bit more size to keep him in the trade. You can see on side in all three markets, Bunds are just really collapsing here. And you can see every time the Bunds tick up, there's new sellers looking to come in, and it's really quite aggressive. And the same with the euro, it's still held towards the high. There's anticipation that with a move this big, there could potentially be quite a severe bounce at the end. So always trying to pay attention to that and when that may come in. So you can see he's largely out of the majority's position. He's exhausted his euro position and covered all of that. And Bunds only 8 lots remaining, Bobl only 30 lots remaining. So really, that's the first phase of the trade completed, where he's got his largest size on and pretty much covered. And now it's just trying to figure out whether it's going to have a second leg lower, which really, considering the size of the move, was quite unlikely to the majority of us on the floor at this moment. Or if you want to start fading it, play the cut and reverse for the bounce. So we've just pulled back, say 10 ticks from the low, and as the offer holds, he then initiates another short position, but again with smaller size than initially executed with, and not as aggressive. You never want to be as aggressive in the second phase as you would have been in the first phase of the trade. And now you can see he's actually cut and reverse to 6 lots. Now I want to pause it here. So we've spoken in the past in some of the execution reviews before about the cut and reverse and how to execute it. Now I just want you to pay attention to, the fact that although he's selling, say, 300 lots across 2 markets or 3 markets, it's a tentative execution of the cut and reverse. There's no need to get all out aggressive and try to pick a bottom with your largest size. And what this actually enabled him to do was to really it really saved him quite a lot by just having a feeler, entering in with 5 to 6 lots, and then as he really wasn't getting the reaction that he wanted, as the Bunds began to take the low again quite aggressively, to just cut that loss as a real small loser and just be like, right, now I need to wait for the real end of this move and a clear signal that this move has ended before I start fading it. What you don't want to do is to make, say, 50k or so in the initial part of the move and then start risking that amount or a large proportion of that in the second phase. So you can see now still very small position long in the Bunds, but we'll get out of that pretty much now. It's kind of irrelevant having a 1 lot on for a trader with this size. Now he has executed in the BTPs as well. His thinking was, with the Bunds offering so much, it should potentially drag the BTPs down. He actually gets quite heavy in the BTPs. You'll see he gets up to around 90 lots, which for such a thin market is a very, very large position for this trader to have on. It does break the low, and I think it rotates down to around the 19s area. However, the trader did say that it didn't really play out as expected, and I think the fact that the Bund BTP spread has been so much in play with the Italian theme that's been going on, it's kind of any sell-off in the Bunds has potentially been holding up the BTP just a little bit as people are executing the spread or covering the spread, or spread traders are generally being quite active across those two markets. So I just want you to watch the final part of this move. We've actually got around 40s, 41s, was the 0.5% yield for the German 10-year, which is quite a key level. And we'll see that there was a bit of a flush through. I think it also coincided with a 60-minute swing low in the Bunds. And I just want you to pay attention how quickly he executes on that final pop through that level, which often the pop indicates the end of a move like this. They like to finish with a final flurry, and then it's a good place to execute the cut and reverse a little bit more aggressively this second time, whereby now the expectation is that this move is very much overextended and it should need to pull back. So we see through 40s, 32s, 33s. Not sure if we get one last pop. Bid starts to hold 33s, 34s. Okay, and the final pop down to 22s. So really waited for that confirmation before he started to try and execute the cut and reverse. But it's not necessarily the main focus of this trade, but just something I wanted to draw your attention to. You can see he's still short in the BTP position, just working that as it does start to rotate a little bit lower as the Bund bounces towards this sort of 20s area, but really getting quite aggressive in that position. Now I'm just going to stop it there because we've got to get on to the denial which come out the following day, and just a bit of commentary that we've got from this trader. He actually got caught up. He thought that this would bounce higher. I think the expectation amongst all of us on the floor was for such a significant move, it should bounce higher, but it actually just seemed to flag around this sort of area. And although we wouldn't do a lot of damage buying in there, and there's potential to be chopped up a little bit, but that was just something quite unusual about this trade, the fact that it offered so hard and then couldn't really bounce on the day. Perhaps just a signal of like the technical setup and really just the fact that the Bunds wanted to offer on this day. Not going to pay too much attention to the BTP position because I just think it's there's probably too much to talk about there. But now I just want to skip over to the denial. Again, same markets I want you to pay attention to. Bund, the Bobl, and the Euro. So just got some notes here from the trader. So moving on to the following day, he checked the calendar and he knew that Praet was speaking. So having a look through the last Praet speech, which he gave on the 20th, so only 5 days before, and realised how dovish it was. Now, Praet is consistently quite dovish, so really your expectation is that for a move that's so far overextended and potentially overread by the market, that there's going to be a denial and there's going to be a sources comment or some commentary that comes through from one of the ECB members to potentially repair some of the move of that. Now I think the Euro actually reversed quite a lot of the move the prior day, whereas the Bund didn't. So with the Euro being the main focus really of the ECB, we weren't sure if this was going to come out, but it was part of this trader's process was to be thoroughly prepared to know that during this speech that was scheduled at I think 9 o'clock, You know, you have to be so astute. Anything dovish, any reference to Draghi's speech yesterday being overinterpreted, you know, he wanted to be really aggressive on that. He wanted to buy the Bunds and look to retrace a large proportion, or at least a proportion of the move from the day before. So really this all combined with the overextension of the day before, and the fact that the wording really wasn't that significant that Draghi dropped. So the first comment that came out by Praet was this: there's a pickup in growth, prices need further accommodation. So this set the market ticking up a few ticks, and you'll be able to see the trader execute his initial position there. And then the second headline, which we're going to see the execution of, is Draghi's comments yesterday weren't anything new. Now this is jackpot, this is exactly what you're looking to hear, and as such you'll see the markets react accordingly. So he's executed, it's 80 lots long in the Bunds on the initial headline that we spoke about, a more accommodative stance by Praet, trying to get a little bit more. It's built up to 180 lots, and now we'll see when the second comment drops. There we are. Right, so we can see, I think it was long about 180 lots, I think from this 95s area, and as that second comment dropped, blip up 10 ticks, and he's executed 400 lots long in the Bobl as well. Now, immediately 2 ticks offside, which is not really a necessarily comfortable thing to see. Obviously, but again, just touching on the execution of these denials and the nature of the moves. If you watch the previous execution stream where we talk specifically about denials, we note that with something like this, there's a lot of eyes on it. And when there's a lot of eyes on it, not only will it react very quickly, which we've seen before, but there will also be smash and grab trades being executed. So people are buying the blip and then selling and driving the market down. And what we often see here is quite a kind of a large rotation or a high velocity, high volatility rotation or chop on the move. And this is what you're going to see here. It's not a comfortable thing to be in, especially in the Bunds. The Bobls being a little bit more stable, but it's just something we're starting to see quite consistently on the denial trades. They're never as smooth as the Bunds. So you've kind of got to understand that, you know, you may be given an opportunity to get out at the upper extreme of that initial rotation that's set from the denial. So you can see here comes all the way back. He's still not gone inside in his Bobl position, but just confident that expectations that this is going to happen. The market's going to rotate, and just make sure that, you know, you don't hold it for too long and you work yourself out on these rotations higher. So he's also executed 50 lots short in the euro, recollecting the correlations that were working quite nicely the day before. A really quite heavy position, 400 lots in the Bobl, 200 lots in the Bund. Again though, you know, something that we discussed, really this bid wasn't as strong as we expected. We will see it trade up, but don't think it actually takes the highs here, which was very strange to trade up within 1 or 2 ticks of the highs and not have that final kind of bit of oomph to get it over the line. It's quite unusual for, especially when the move the prior day, the sell-off, was about 70 ticks. So, you know, it's only bid up maybe, I think from around 95s, you know, it's maybe gone 20, 25 ticks, but that's still quite a small proportion of the initial move from the day before. And as always, this trader's in with big size, working his size out, but quite cautious to add in again to this trade unless he really starts to see that push higher through the highs of the day. So I think, we can agree that over the course of 2 days, he's executed very well in 3 markets on 2 different comments that have been dropped. I'm just going to leave that running for now because there's just a couple more points that want to get across. But really, I just think something that needs to be stressed here really was pressed upon me when talking through this trade with this trader is that how you manage yourself your day after a good day. Obviously the Monday executed well, banked a nice bit of cash. However, it was still in his mind that this denial could potentially come through, and wanted to make sure that he was mentally prepared for it. And there's a quote here from this trader. It's like, whether the trade worked or not when executing the denial, whether it were in 20 ticks or 50 ticks or 100 ticks is irrelevant. The important thing is to execute right, put your balls on the line, and if it goes, then amazing, and you clean. And I think that's part of that full cycle of executing, reviewing where you could have improved, and then making sure you apply those improvements to the best of your ability the following time, and just repeating the process. That's how you really get to this sort of size that this trader has got to really. But also it just sort of shows the process that goes involved, making sure that you've read through the prior speeches that the same speaker's delivered, so that that potentially the tone, or quite the expectation is the tone that he's going to deliver is going to be dovish, which means that holding a fairly large long position throughout his speech isn't necessarily the riskiest thing that you could do. On the other end of the spectrum, you wouldn't necessarily be doing that if you knew that it was a very hawkish member who was talking, because you wouldn't want to be 180 lots long around 94s, 95s in the Bunds, and it to blip against you with some hawkish rhetoric for him to bring up. So really just building on the process and the fact that this doesn't happen overnight. It's years and years and years of just accruing and building up those natural reactions in order to be able to digest the information that's presented with you in a very, very fast time frame and execute appropriately.